The worst has happened. A blight has begun. King Cailan summons the Grey Wardens to Ostagar to fight the Darkspawn horde alongside his armies. We need you, and others like you. As leader of the Grey Wardens in Ferelden, I would like to formally invite you to join our order. Come, your new life awaits.
Hello guys, I'm going to keep this intro short. In this video I'll give you a recap of all the origin stories from Dragon Age Origins. I'm doing this as a part of a bigger recap of the whole game that I'll be releasing after this. I'll be including the origin stories in that as well, but I wanted to make a separate video first. That's all I'll say for now. I'll explain more at the end of the video. But for now, grab yourself a cup of tea and let me tell you all about the Warden's origin stories. Our tale begins in 930 Dragon, at the castle of Cousland in the Ternier of High Ever. There have been rumors of a blight in Ferelden, and the king is gathering an army at Ostagar to prepare for the battle with the Darkspawn. Teyrn, Bryce, Cousland, and Arwen and Hau are discussing the situation in the main hall while they wait for Hau's forces to arrive. Hau says that he thinks his men must have been delayed and expects them to arrive the next morning. Bryce decides that he'll wait here at the castle until Hau's men arrive, and he says that he'll send out his oldest son Fergus to ride with his own forces tonight. A moment later, a young human noble enters the room, Bryce Cousland's youngest child. Bryce Cousland tells his youngest that they will be in charge of the castle while he and Fergus are leading the family's soldiers to join King Cailan's army. They are also introduced to Duncan, a senior Grey Warden. Duncan explains that he's here to look for Grey Warden recruits, and suggests that the young Cousland would make a promising recruit. Though the Terran isn't quite fond of the idea of letting his youngest child join the Grey Wardens. Even so, Duncan also has his eye on Sir Gilmore, a knight in service of the Cousland family, as a potential candidate. After being introduced to Duncan, the human noble is tasked with instructing Fergus to depart immediately with the Cousland forces. On their way to Fergus's room, they are met by Sir Gilmore, who tells him that their mother, Tyrna Eleanor Cousland, wants them to collect their dog from the kitchens. It turns out Dog was chasing a bunch of rats, and the human noble and Sir Gilmore assist Dog in killing them. Afterwards, young noble Cousland finds Fergus in his room as he says his goodbyes to his wife and son. Bryce and Eleanor join them soon after. After the family shares a last, peaceful moment together, the human noble heads to bed, so that they are well rested for the day ahead. Little do they know, though. Later that night, the human noble is awoken by the sounds of battle coming from the other side of the door. The castle is under attack, and the men that infiltrated the castle aren't your average raiders. They are Hau's men. After Cousland and their dog fight off some men, they run into their mother, who tells them their father is missing. He never even came to bed. Together they fight their way through the castle, and as they search the other rooms, they find that Fergus's wife and son have been killed, along with many other people in the castle, even the servants. This is the goal. Everyone in the castle, dead. With most of the Cousland forces away from the castle, they are left vulnerable, a perfect target. Hau's men were never delayed. This was his plan all along. Hau has betrayed them. After collecting armor and weapons from the treasury, the human noble and their mother start heading towards the servants' exit in the larder, where they hope to find Bryce. When entering the main hall, they find Sir Gilmore instructing the few remaining defenders and holding off Hau's soldiers. Sir Gilmore tells him that Teyrn Bryce was wounded, and he was last seen heading for the larder. As Cousland and their mother enter the larder, they do indeed find Bryce, gravely wounded and unable to move. He tells him that he was ambushed by Hau's men, but he was rescued by Duncan, who brought him here. A moment later, Duncan enters the larder and confirms what Bryce had feared. Hau's men have surrounded the castle. Bryce's wounds would make it impossible for him to escape, so he tells his wife and youngest child to go without him. With the help of Duncan, they should be able to make it. Duncan agrees to help, but in exchange he asks to recruit the young Cousland, and reminds them of the looming threat of the Blight. Bryce agrees. Eleanor refuses to leave her husband's side, however, and tells her youngest child to go with Duncan alone. Cousland's parents are killed in the attack. but certainly not without making sure to take quite a few of housemen with them. After escaping the castle, Duncan and Cousland make their way to Ostagar, where they will meet the king and the rest of the forces. Our tale of the mage begins in 930 Dragon, at the Circle Tower in Lake Calenhad. A young mage apprentice is about to go through their harrowing, the final test before becoming a proper mage. The test has them enter the Fade, where they will encounter several spirits and demons. Soon after entering the Fade, the mage apprentice meets Mouse. Mouse explains that he was an apprentice that failed his harrowing. The Templars killed him for it, and now his mind is stuck in the Fade, with no body to return to. Together with the help of Mouse, the mage apprentice manages to defeat several demons and spirits they encounter. The true test, however, becomes clear when the apprentice realizes that Mouse isn't who he says he is. Mouse was never an apprentice. He is a demon, looking for a way out of the Fade. His attempt at tricking and possessing the apprentice fails, however, as their mind is strong enough to resist. After the exchange with the demon, it leaves, and the apprentice finishes their harrowing and emerges as a fully fledged mage. As a young mage wakes up in their bed in the apprentice room, they are greeted by their friend Jowan. Jowan asks them about the harrowing and expresses that he is nervous about not having gone through the harrowing himself yet. After a short conversation, Jowan mentions that First Enchanter Irving wants to speak with his former apprentice, and he leaves. In Irving's office, the young mage is introduced to Duncan, one of the fabled Grey Wardens. Irving explains that Duncan is here because he is recruiting mages for the king's army, and after congratulating the new mage for passing their harrowing, he asks them to escort Duncan to the guest quarters. After doing so, the mage is approached by a nervous Jowan. Jowan says that he needs to talk to them, but not here. He doesn't feel safe talking here. The mage follows Jowan through the halls of the senior mage quarters to the Circle Tower's chapel. We should be safe here. Jowan introduces his friend to Lily, a Chantry initiate. Jowan explains that he and Lily are in love, but Lily's vows forbid her from engaging in relationships, so they have to keep it a secret. He also says that there are rumors going around about him being a blood mage. He says that the rumors are not true, but the Templars believe in them, and they are planning on making him tranquil. Lily says that she saw the documents confirming this, signed by First Enchanter Irving. They tell the mage that they are planning on destroying Jowan's phylactery and escaping, and they need the mage's help to do so. The mage can agree to help them, or tell First Enchanter Irving about the plan. Either way, the young mage ends up going with Jowan and Lily to destroy Jowan's phylactery. The three of them head down to the basement, where they eventually reach the phylactery chamber. They find Jowan's phylactery, sitting on one of the tables, and the mage gives it to Jowan. Jowan holds it in the air, contemplating his freedom for a few seconds, before dropping it to the ground. The glass shatters into pieces, blood splattering all over the ground. It is done. The phylactery is destroyed. Jowan is free. Lily, Jowan, and our mage hurry out of the phylactery chamber. But as soon as they come up from the basement, they are met by First Enchanter Irving and Knight Commander Gregor. Gregor expresses his disappointment and sentences Jowan to death and Lily to be taken to Aeonar, a Templar-run prison fortress. Before the Templars can do anything, however, Jowan steps in between them and Lily to protect her. He grabs a dagger and slices his own hand. Drawing power from his blood, he casts a spell, knocking over Gregor, Irving, and the other Templars. Lily is horrified. The rumors are true. Jowan is a blood mage. Jowan attempts to reassure Lily, and he says that he'll give it up. He'll give it up, all magic. He just wants to be with her. But having broken her trust, he fails to convince her, and she tells him to get away. And so, he does. Gregor is furious that the mage had a hand in helping a blood mage escape, and demands that they are punished. Before he can do anything, however, Duncan steps in. He tells Irving and Gregor that apart from mages for the king's army, he is also looking for Grey Warden recruits, and he says that he wants this mage to join the Grey Warden ranks. Gregor objects, but Duncan stresses that there are bigger threats out there than blood mages, and this mage is needed. Gregor objects again, but Duncan's mind cannot be changed. The Mage says their goodbyes, and shortly after they leave with Duncan and head for Ostagar. Our tale of the Dalish Elf begins in 930 Dragon. Mahariel of the Sabrae clan and their childhood friend Tamlin are hunting in the woods of the Brazilian forest when they come across 3 humans who claim they've discovered ancient elven ruins in a nearby cave. After dealing with the humans, the 2 elves decide to check out the ruins that the humans were talking about. Once they enter the ruins, they notice that most of the architecture is human in origin, but there are elven artifacts scattered all over. After exploring the ruins and dealing with traps, walking corpses, and a bear scarn, Tamlin finds a strange mirror. An alluvion. Curious, Tamlin looks into the mirror and sees fascinating images of an ominous underground city, and the mirror reacts to Tamlin's touch. As Tamlin keeps looking into the mirror, however, he senses a great blackness and a dark presence staring back at him. Everything is quiet for a moment. But then, the alluvion lights up and a great force emanates from the mirror, knocking Mahariel unconscious. They awake briefly, catching a glimpse of a strange human man talking to them, before passing out again. The Dalish Elf awakes a few days later. They are back in the forest, back at the clan's camp, but Tamlin is nowhere to be seen. A moment later they are greeted by their clanmate Fenerel, who tells them that a Grey Warden had found them unconscious in a cave, alone, and he carried them back to camp before disappearing into the woods again. They had a fever when the strange human found them, and had just barely recovered from it. Keeper Marathari had managed to weaken the illness using old Dalish magic. A moment later, Keeper Marathari approaches Mahariel, and tells him that the Grey Warden that rescued him is named Duncan. After Mahariel tells the Keeper what happened, the Keeper tells him that, with the possible threat of the Darkspawn and the nearby human village causing trouble for the clan, she has decided it is time to prepare to leave for the north. Marathari wants to look for Tamlin one last time, however, and sends Mahariel, Merrill, and possibly Fenerel back to the ruins to look for him. After the Dalish Elves make their way back to the ruins, they encounter a couple of Darkspawn. The group has no problem defeating them, but apart from the Darkspawn that now stalk the woods, there is something off. The forest is quiet. Too quiet. The air feels unnatural. Merrill theorizes that it might have been the mirror that caused this. They should be careful. Once Mahariel and her clanmates get back to the ruins, they find that the place is now filled with Darkspawn, and still no sign of Tamlin. They fight their way through, and when they enter the room where the mirror is located, they find Duncan, who's been investigating it. He explains that the mirror was somehow carrying the Darkspawn corruption, and Tamlin must have unleashed it when he touched it. This is how Mahariel got infected, and their recovery is only temporary. Before they leave the ruins, the mirror needs to be dealt with. Duncan draws his sword, and he shatters the mirror. With the mirror now destroyed, he urges the Dalish to leave the ruins, but they still haven't found Tamlin. Duncan tells them that Tamlin was most likely also infected, but unlike Mahariel, he will have been exposed for 3 days untreated, and there is nothing they can do for him. He is gone. Everything in these ruins has been corrupted. It is unsafe, and they should leave as quickly as possible. And should the Dalish ever return here, they should make sure to cleanse the place with fire. Once back at the Danish camp, Duncan tells Keeper Marathari about what happened. When Mahariel speaks with them, they say that they have come to an arrangement. Mahariel is sick, and the only cure for them is becoming a Grey Warden. As it happens, Duncan has been looking for new recruits, and he says that he would like to take the Dalish Elf with him to Ostagar. Keeper Marathari recounts that the Dalish were oaths to the Wardens long ago, and with no other options, the Keeper has agreed. After saying their goodbyes, Mahariel leaves with Duncan for Ostagar to become a Grey Warden. The tale of the City Elf begins in 930 Dragon. The elves of the Denerim alienage are working hard as they are making preparations for not one, but 2 weddings that will be taking place later today. A sleepy city elf named Debris is woken up by their cousin Shiani, who tells them that they need to get ready for their big day. They're getting married today, and so is their other cousin Saurus. Their betrothed arrived early, and they need to get themselves ready for the wedding. So Debris gets up, gets dressed, and after a quick chat with their father, they head out to find their cousin Saurus. After meeting up with Saurus, the two head towards the center of the alienage to meet their future spouses. However, on their way there, they come across a few humans. Among them is Von Kendals, the Arl of Denerim's son. As Debris and Saurus approach, they see the humans harassing some of the elven women. Debris steps in, and while they are talking to Von, Shiani decides she isn't going to take shit from this guy, so she grabs a bottle, a pretty big one at that, and hits him in the face with it, knocking him unconscious. After Von's friends carry his ass out of the alienage, Debris and Saurus finally get the opportunity to meet their betrothed. Shortly thereafter, Saurus spots another human in the alienage. When he and Debris talk to him, Valendrian, the alienage's elder, introduces him as Duncan, a Grey Warden and a good friend of his. He is here because a new blight has begun, and King Cailan has summoned the Grey Wardens to fight alongside his army at Ostagar. Valendrian points out that this is kind of an awkward timing, as there is to be a wedding. 2, in fact. And so Duncan says that his concerns can wait for now, and he leaves the two city elves to prepare for their wedding ceremony. And later that day, the wedding ceremony does indeed take place. However, not too long after the ceremony starts, it is interrupted by Von, who has returned with a group of armed guards, and he abducts some of the elven women. And a few different things can happen depending on whether the city elf is male or female. Both are always knocked unconscious, but if the city elf is female, she will be taken with the rest of the women, and will have to fight her way out of the castle. If the city elf is male, he and Saurus go on a rescue mission and sneak their way into the castle. A female city elf will wake up in a room with Shiani and the rest of the elves that were taken. As the two cousins talk about what their options are, some of Von's guards come in and take the rest of the elves away, leaving Debris alone with 2 of the guards. But then Saurus shows up, gives his cousin a weapon, and together they manage to fight their way through the castle. A male city elf will sneak into the castle through the servants' entrance together with Saurus. Once inside the castle, they will fight their way through until they reach Von's room. Either way, eventually Debris and Saurus enter Von's room, where they find Shiani on the ground, and they realize what has happened. Von tries to talk his way out of it, and he offers the city elf money. If they refuse Von's offer, they will end up fighting Von and his friends, killing all of them. For a male Debris, his fiancée will be found in a nearby room. For a female Debris, her fiancé was unfortunately killed by the guards during their rescue mission. After dealing with Von, they leave the castle with Shiani and the rest of the other elves. But soon after their return, the city guards show up at the alienage to arrest the city elf for the attack on the Arl of Denerim's estate and killing the Earl's son. Before Debris can be taken away, however, Duncan invokes the right of conscription and saves him from being arrested. And so, after saying their goodbyes, Debris travels to Ostagar with Duncan, leaving the alienage behind. The noble dwarf's tale begins in 930 Dragon. In the palace of Orzammar, a feast is being prepared to celebrate the Dwarf Noble's appointment as Orzammar's newest commander. Before the feast officially starts, the Dwarf Noble is told by Gorham, their second in command, that Lord Harrowmon has opened up the provings and suggested they go and watch. On their way there, the Dwarf Noble runs into their older brother Trian and their younger brother Balin. Trian, being the oldest and heir to the throne, arrogantly demands the Dwarf Noble joins the ceremony at the throne room at once. However, Gorham tells him that they wouldn't be needed for a few hours at least, which Trian clearly doesn't appreciate as he looks down upon dwarves of the lower caste. After their brothers leave, the Dwarf Noble and Gorham head to the proving grounds, where the Dwarf Noble can either watch or participate themselves. Later that day, the Dwarf Noble joins the feast, where they, as King Endrin's second child, are officially named Orzammar's next commander. The king announces that the new commander will be part of a mission tomorrow, to go into the deep roads and strike a blow against the Darkspawn in order to recover access to some of their most important mines. Not only that, but he will also allow their honored guest, Duncan, head of the Ferelden Grey Wardens, to venture far into the deep roads and investigate the Darkspawn there. While they seem to be withdrawing, they are massing on the surface, and Duncan fears a new blight. After the feast, the Dwarf Noble is met by Balin, who has a worrying message for them. Trian is going to try to kill them. It is hard to believe, but he overheard him giving the orders to his men. Trian thinks that they are a threat to him taking the throne, and he might even be right about that. The people and the assembly think highly of the Dwarven Noble. They are more personable and well regarded than Trian has ever been, and while rare, the assembly has named a lesser family member king or queen before. If the Dwarf Noble is victorious against the Darkspawn tomorrow, their father might replace Trian on the spot, and if not, the assembly will surely turn on him once King Endrin dies. Trian's pride will never allow him to step aside. Killing him might be the only option. The next day, the dwarves head into the Deep Roads. The king sends a Dwarf Noble along with Gorim on a special mission to retrieve the Shield of Aeducan. After fighting some Darkspawn, they find the chamber where Paragon Aeducan is entombed, as well as the shield. However, they are ambushed by a group of mercenaries. After dealing with them, the Dwarf Noble finds Trian's Aeducan signet ring, indicating that, perhaps, Balin was right about Trian's plans. After retrieving the shield, the Dwarf Noble and their group head back to the meeting point where they find Trian and his guards. If the Dwarf Noble had agreed to kill Trian when Balin gave the warning, a fight will break out, and Trian will be killed. If the Dwarf Noble refused, Trian and his guards will already be dead. As the Dwarf Noble stands over the body of their older brother, Balin and the king's party arrive. Balin then claims that the noble has killed Trian in order to become king or queen, and no amount of protest convinces the Dwarven lords otherwise. The Dwarf Noble is arrested on the spot and sent to a cell. It doesn't take long before their sentence is carried out. They are to be sealed in the Deep Roads to fight Darkspawn until they are overwhelmed and killed, while Gorim is exiled to the surface. And so the Dwarf Noble is sent into the Deep Roads with nothing but their clothes and a weapon. They wander the Deep Roads for some time, fighting off some Darkspawn. But then...
By the Maker, it's a dwarf!
Lady Aeducan, what are you doing here alone? Where are your troops?
The Dwarf Noble runs into Duncan and the rest of his Grey Warden party, who are still investigating the Darkspawn. Recognizing the Dwarf Noble's skill, he decides to recruit them into the Grey Wardens. And so, they leave for Ostagar, where they will fight the Darkspawn hordes alongside the human forces led by King Kaelin. This tale begins in 930 Dragon in the streets of Dusttown in Orzammar. The Dwarf Commoner is part of the Braska family, a family of castless dwarves living in poverty in Dusttown. As castless, Braska and their half-sister Rika are reduced to a life of petty crime, working for the Carda boss Barat in order to stay alive. While Rika is tasked to find a wealthy male suitor, the Dwarf Commoner usually runs errands for Barat, including some more unsavory tasks. Today, Barat wants him to find a man named Oskaius, a smuggler who has been hiding lyrium from him. Braska heads out and meets up with their best friend Leski, who also works for Barat. Together they find Oskaius in the Tapster's Tavern and interrogate him. After they deal with him by either accepting a bribe from him, sparing him, or killing him, they report back to Barat, who then gives them a second task. The warrior caste is hosting a proving today, and Barat is betting on a fighter named Everd. Braska and Leski are to get into the proving grounds and find out who Everd is fighting, and drug the fighter's drink to make sure Everd wins. Barat mentions that he has a lot of coin riding on this, his and that of others, and he makes it very clear that failure is not an option.
If I don't see Everd's name on the winner's sheet, you'd better make sure I never see you or your sister ever again.
When Braska and Leski get into the proving grounds, they spot one of the famed Grey Wardens. After a short conversation with him, Braska learns that the Grey Warden is called Duncan, and that he is here helping to find recruits for the Grey Wardens. When Duncan leaves, Braska and Leski continue looking for Everd. Luckily, it doesn't take long for them to find him, but the man is in a bit of a rough state. It seems Everd has had one too many, and is now passed out on the floor. He won't be fighting anyone anytime soon. With failure not being an option, Leski suggests that Braska put on Everd's armor and fight in his place, since they are about the same size and because they always brag about how good of a fighter they are. It's risky, and they'll need to make sure no one finds out if Cassis is taking part in the proving. But with this seemingly being their only option, Braska agrees. Their plan seems to work. No one seems suspicious, and the Dwarf Commoner manages to defeat their opponents with ease. As their third opponent falls, the crowd cheers. Now it is time for the last opponent to enter the ring. One last fight, and their work here will be done. But before the last opponent can be announced, a drunken man stumbles into the arena. It is Averd, the real Averd. Shit. It doesn't take long for the Proving Master to shout imposter. The Dwarf Commoner is forced to remove their helmet, and with the Cassis brand on their face now clearly visible, the Proving Master calls for the guards. Duncan, who was watching the proving and clearly impressed by Braska's skill, tries to change the Proving Master's mind. But this is Orzamar's law, and there is nothing he can do. Braska wakes up in a cell, with Lesky in a cell next to them. As the two of them talk about how to escape, Jarvia enters the room. She is Barat's second in command, and they are surprised to see her here. She tells them that they are in Barat's personal dungeon, and that he spent a lot of time and money bribing the right people to get them here. But now, they are loose ends, and when Barat gets back, he'll make sure to deal with them. Braska and Lesky aren't planning on sitting there and waiting for their death though, and they manage to break out of their cells. They fight their way through the hideout, killing every guard they come across. And when they get to Barat, they make sure to kill him too. But killing Barat doesn't solve everything. The Dwarf Commoner is still wanted for impersonating Averd and fighting in the proving, and every guard in Orzammar is probably looking for them right now. And indeed, it doesn't take long for them to be found. As soon as they exit the hideout, they are met by a group of guards. As the guard tells them to drop their weapons, someone approaches. It's Duncan, the Grey Warden they met earlier. Still impressed by the dwarf's courage and skill, he uses the rite of conscription to recruit them, somewhat frustrating the guard. With the Darkspawn becoming a larger threat on the surface every day, the Dwarf Commoner joins Duncan, leaving Orzammar behind them. And that's it for the Warden's origin stories. Before I end this video, I'll explain what I'm planning on doing with the recaps. Okay, so in preparation to Dragon Age Dreadwolf, I thought it would be nice to do a recap of the Dragon Age narrative so far. And I wanted to do that in the form of telling it as a story. I guess similar to what I do for my history of videos. I am planning on doing this for all three of the games, so these videos will contain major spoilers for all three games, including most of the DLC. And afterwards I might want to expand it with videos about other things that happen in Thedas, like other tales, legends and myths, etc. But a recap of the series would be nice to start with as we prepare for the next Dragon Age. And I know Dreadwolf is probably still a while away, but honestly, even if the game releases in 2024, it's nothing compared to how long we've been waiting already, so, you know, it's been like 8 years, another one isn't really that bad. Right, guys? Right? But yes, it's been over 8 years since Inquisition has released, and even more for the other two games, and that's a pretty long time. If it has been a while since you played through the games, you might be a little foggy on the details. Or maybe you're new to Dragon Age and interested in getting Dreadwolf, but have never had the opportunity to play the previous games, and yet you somehow just so happen to stumble upon this video. In that case, hello, welcome, I make Dragon Age content. Anyway, rather than having to look up summaries, read through wikis, or play through all the games, I thought it would be nice to offer an alternative in video format so you can watch instead. Or have it play in the background while you just listen to it, whatever you prefer. Point is, I did all the playing and reading, so you don't have to. If you are willing and able to play through the entire series, go and do that, really. I highly recommend you go and experience the games for yourself. Though if you don't have the time, or you don't want to, or whatever reason, but you still like a recap, these videos will be for you. I want to cover as much of the games as I can, but I probably won't really mention much of the things that happen in the side quests, as that would just be too much to cover in a video. Especially when I take into account all of the different choices and outcomes. So similar to what I just did for the origin stories, I will skip over the minor details. I do, however, want to focus on everything the main storyline has to offer, and I'll cover all of the big choices that are most important for the storyline, and things that I think might be important for Dreadwolf, which is probably still a lot. But I'll try to keep things as structured as possible, I promise. Now the Dragon Age games are all non-linear, of course, so there isn't really a strict order of events apart from like certain points at the start of the game and at the end of the games. I think I'm just going to pick an order that I think makes most sense for the video. As for footage, most of it will probably be of my canon runs, since most of the footage that I already have is of my canon runs, but I'll try to throw in some of my other playthroughs as well. Okay, I think that's everything I wanted to say. A bit of a long outro, huh? To think this part was originally going to be my intro for the next video. Anyway, if you made it all the way to the end, let me know by telling me your favorite kind of tea. And if you like this video, let me know by liking this video. Or leave a comment and let me know what your favorite origin story is. That's it for now though. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.